Yeah, so it's a funny story about the partnership at Will's Wing. There's lots of funny parts of that, but we all kind of came to Will's Wing from different areas, but it was all about the same time. Mike actually was employed by Will's Wing. Sometime around the time that I was hanging around with the Wills guys and flying with them, he was employed there for a short period of time before he got fired. Linda continued to work there. She didn't get fired. But Mike subsequently opened a school, Hang Flight Systems, in Orange County, and negotiated the dealership for the Orange County area. So when I purchased my first Wills Wing glider in 1976, I bought it from another local dealer, and they weren't supposed to sell it to me. It was supposed to go through Mike Meyer. So we didn't hit it off to begin with because I bought the glider, through his exclusive association for this area, and it was, it started out kind of rough to begin with. Anyway, so Mike was doing Hang Flight Systems, teaching people how to fly. I was hanging around with the Wills guys, flying all the time. Linda, I guess I didn't even know Linda was working in the office. She was working in the office. And then a little while later, Rob Kells, the fourth of the gang of four, who actually became kind of the face of Wills Wing for many, many years because he was so charismatic and such a great guy. He showed up with a bunch of his friends, and their plan was to be, they were going to be kind of ski bums in the winter, hanging around skiing, and in the summer, they were going to have a motorhome, and they were going to travel the country and sell hang gliders off the top of the motorhome. So their first stop was to stop at Wills Wing and get a dealership to be able to sell gliders all over the country. Well, the motorhome never left, but the payments kept coming for the motorhome. So within a month or two, everybody decided to leave and take the motorhome back, and Rob stayed, Rob and Dale Sherman. So Rob stayed at Wills Wing when the rest of his friends left, and he was working at Wills Wing in the shop, and eventually negotiated a position as production manager, which, if you knew Rob, is kind of funny. He had a lot of talents, but production manager probably wasn't one of them. But he still contributed a lot. So we had Rob working in the shop, and Rob and I became friends and started flying together. And Rob, when the motorhome left, ended up living at my house on my beanbag. And Mike was doing Hang Flight Systems. Linda was working in the office. And so we were all kind of associated, but except for Rob and me being together, being friends and flying friends, we still didn't really have any relationship with Mike. So that continued on until June of 1977, when Bob Wills was tragically killed filming a commercial. A helicopter essentially blew him into the ground. They had this choreographed routine, and it was the last day of filming, and the helicopter pilot made a deviation from the planned flight course, and Bobby was killed. And it was Friday, I remember, and Rob and I were waiting at the shop for Bobby to come back. We were going to go out to Don Jose's because that's what we always did, Actually went to Baskin Robbins first to have ice cream because they closed earlier, and then went to Don Jose's. Anyway, and Dave Vincent came in and said, "Do you hear? Bobby got killed." And so at that point, Wills Wing had, Bobby was an extraordinarily talented pilot. He was a really bright guy. He had, talents that really I've never really seen equaled since in terms of his coordination, his aptitude, and as I said, he's a really smart guy. But business management probably wasn't the strong suit. And Wills Wing at that point was in financial distress, would probably be an understatement. Too many people working, too many friends working there, too much, they were just too far behind in everything. So Wills Wing was in a crisis. We were already having trouble making payroll, and the glider that had just been released at that point was called the XC, and it was a really high-performance glider. It was really hot. but there'd been some incidents on it that, people were afraid of it. So we had this basically release a new glider that people are afraid of now, even though it was really hot when it came out. Bobby gets killed. Bobby's the only person that holds the company together. He's the designer, he's the pilot, he's the iconic everything. The company's in financial distress. And so Rob was working there, Linda was working there, and there was another guy, Steve Schaefer, who was also not really working there, but he was just kind of hanging around and ended up driving for us when we went flying. And he's about 10 years older than us. At that point, I had just turned 21, and Rob's like 9 months older than I am. And so Rob kind of stepped up to the plate and convinced the Wills family that, we could make this work. And I wasn't working there at that point, just Linda was working there, and Mike was doing hang flight systems. And we kind of subsisted for the next few months on purchasing materials by, in small quantities, like, you buy one roll of sailcloth if you can pay off some of your past account. The employees were just really supportive and, oftentimes wouldn't get their paychecks on time. And we went on like that. And I decided at that point that we needed a new glider because we'd had this really popular glider, just extraordinarily good glider that Bobby designed called the SST that was progressive improvement of earlier models. There was the standard, the swallowtail, and the SST was the super swallowtail. So that was a great glider. But then it was the new great glider was the XC, which scared everybody. And to give you an idea what this glider was, the glider, my XC, my Willswing XC220 had 237 square feet, 38-foot wingspan, and a very tight sail with no preformed battens, and the control bar was over 6 feet tall. So to say that it was kind of challenging for most people is probably an understatement. So middle of the day at Crestline was, all I could do to control the glider. And, I was flying hundreds of hours a year at that point and probably had better skills than I do now. So we needed a new glider. And as it turned out, one of the prototypes for the XC, which everybody loved, was called the Pulley Special, and that was the glider that actually Bobby had been killed on, and it was destroyed and there was only one of them, and it was destroyed when in the accident. So there were, magic marker marks on the floor for what the Pulley Special sail, was, and I reconstructed the frame and the sail, and made a new Pulley Special, and that was my first Willswing glider design. Okay, so my first Willswing glider design was rebuilding the Pulley Special, which had been a prototype glider that Bob Wills had designed. And it flew great, but it wasn't finished. It needed to be finished. And as I said, Steve Schaefer was this other person that was involved at Willswing at that time, and actually was probably as involved with the management of Willswing as anybody else at that time, because he had more management experience. And I went to Steve, and I had a different job. I worked for my uncle. My uncle's a foundation engineer, and I worked for him, as a soils engineer, structural soils engineer. And I went to Steve and I said, we need to finish this glider. I don't have time to do it. I think you should hire Mike Meyer to do it. And so Steve contracted with Mike Meyer to finish the Pulley Special. Mike made some changes to it, put a little bigger keel pocket on it, put a smaller control bar on it, and that became the Willswing Alpha, which was our first new glider from Rob, Mike, and me, and that saved the company.